Welcome to the 866 Governance, Administration and Finance Committee meeting. We have a full house of committee members here today, and we also welcome the Mayor and Councillors Duran and Gates. I'll start. There's no attendances or apology comments. There's no request for leave of absence. Have I got someone who can confirm the minutes? Councillor Curtis, seconded Councillor Fowler. Any comments about the minutes? No. Happy to move. Councillor Curtis, all in favour? Great, thank you. And no conflict of interest declarations, I understand. I'll move a procedural motion that we will move item 7.2 up to the beginning so that we can accommodate the Mayor's time. So I move that. Seconded Councillor Wilkinson, all in favour. Thank you very much. Okay, so 7.2 is a confidential item and the confidential terms on the screen is that that we must move into closed session pursuant to section 254J part 3 of local government regulations due to it being related to the CEO's performance appraisal policy. So I'll move that we go into closed. Second, Councillor Taylor, all in favour. Thank you very much.
That's pretty clear enough.
Okay, so live streaming's on. We're back in open. We've just had a confidential conversation about item 7.2, CEO Annual Performance Appraisal Policy. The recommendation is on the screen. I'll move that recommendation. Seconder, Councillor Mayor. Mr. Mayor.
That's fine.
Mr. Councillor Mayor. This is the biggest, employment contract that the city enters into, and certainly the only one that is the responsibility of this council. We had a thorough conversation, and we thank the legal advice for providing clarity on it. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to it? No, for or against? Okay, I'll move the item. All in favour? Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I leave?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, so we're now going to go back to our agenda. We're about to start. So I'm just going to go through the other items, we have 5.1 and 6.1 starred. Does anyone wish to unstar those items?
It's been a long
No? Okay, we're good. Okay, so I'll move the starred items. Seconder, Councillor Wilkinson. All in favour? Thank you. And we will move to, was there any items anyone wishes to star, 6.2 or 7.1? No, we'll go to 6.1. Thank you very much. The monthly financial report. We'll start with Councillor Fiala's questions to Ms Farquhar.
I didn't understand, but okay.
Oh, no, sorry, I meant 6.2. My apologies. 6.2.
6.2.
Apologies. I just moved 5.1 and 6.1. Right. We're doing 6.2. Thank you. You're good. When you're ready.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, we're bringing two policy reviews or the outcomes of two policy reviews to you at this meeting, and they are our public management of trees policy, management of trees on council-controlled land, which we are bringing you a revised version today, and I just want to go through a bit of background in relation to this particular policy. So we did review this policy probably in about June of last year and brought a revised version to the GAF committee in October. In that GAF committee in October, we were requested, the item was deferred, and we were requested to go away and consider a few items, particularly as it centred around risk and the factors taken into account for the risk assessment process, the availability of public information, and how Council considers non-technical matters in relation to trees. We undertook a response for those questions, and particularly in relation to part 1 and 2, which was the risk assessment process through group engagement with councillors on the 1st and 4th of December last year. Subsequent to those sessions, and there was a number of particular matters that were raised in those sessions, which really centred around that opportunity to consider additional factors in making a decision in a very small number of circumstances. We then took that away, that feedback from councillors. We undertook some reviews, and in early January commenced independent one-on-one consultation with yourselves with an amended version of the policy. And subsequent to that, I think what's happened is out of that, there's two key issues really that have arisen. One is in relation to that ability to consider those non-technical factors in those circumstances. The other matter that was quite common that we received in the feedback was in relation to tree matters in response to development approvals or works on private land, and those particular matters are not considered in this policy and are a matter for our development assessment teams in the organisation, which we're happy to connect them to you with. So what we've done is on the back of that, we've then reviewed the policy again. We've worked with our subject matter experts. I do have a couple on hand if you have any technical questions to answer this afternoon. And we feel that we've come up with a good compromise in terms of the policy position. It is very much the same as the previous policy position. We've just, I think, provided some simplicity and clarity around some of those processes. And we've provided a revised version for your consideration today.
Councillor Fowler.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. It might be a question for the technical officers in the back, but I just wanted to ask how can officers outline the three-step review process, how it will work in practice, particularly when non-technical concerns are being raised by residents, and how these will be considered.
Certainly. I'll invite Ross Macaulay, Manager, sorry, I did write your title down, it's so very long, Parks, Open Space Assessment and Planning. Absolutely. Thanks, Ross.
So through the chair, councillor, if I heard you correctly, you're asking for the process by which someone can challenge a decision under the policy. Is that correct?
Just to clarify, I was really asking if you would, just for anybody watching at home, just outline how the three-step process would be in practice, how it would work, particularly around the non-technical assessment.
Okay, through the chair, I'll talk about the technical assessment first, and then I'll go into the non-technical assessment. So a technical assessment typically arrives at either a complaint or an issue, and that could come in through a number of different mechanisms. It could be a call to a councillor, or a letter to the city itself, or a notification for maintenance, or any of those various different myriad of ways that this member of the community can get in contact with the city. First point of call is that our maintenance officers, so the guys that are out there managing trees day in, day out, will attend the site, and they will make an assessment based on the policy and normal arboricultural standards and practices. If there's a disagreement with the resident on that first initial assessment, that assessment will get then escalated to my team, and my team have the arborists that are of a high, do a more technical and thorough assessment from a technical perspective. Sometimes they will also engage an independent arborist to reassure and to ensure that, to the resident, that our technical assessment is based on sound independent arboricultural practices. If there are matters pertaining to this particular matter that are non-technical in nature, i.e. we look at the tree, and for all intents and purposes the tree should remain or should stay and it's being managed correctly as per the policy, but there are other non-technical matters that the resident or the customer would like us to consider, we essentially ask them to provide evidence of those other non-technical matters. That might be things like evidence of damage to their property and replacement costs or repair costs. It might be matters pertaining to their health, so doctor's records. It might be allergies and those types of things that are not related to the tree itself in terms of its form and function, but it may be pertinent to the decision on hand. That information we gather, and then it'll come to a decision maker within council, and that decision maker is, as per reference in the policy, a delegate of the CEO, and will contemplate all of those matters and make a final decision. We look at obviously the replacement value, where there could be potential opportunities to replace that can be if appropriate. But we essentially take into account all of those other factors as part of that decision.
Councillor Fowler.
Just one follow-up, if I may, Chair. If you wouldn't mind, could we just discuss escalating it to a social need? And when I say that, so we've had the Derico that's come through, Christmas 2023 storms, and then Tropical Cyclone Alfred after. An example might be that a tree has come through from public land through somebody's property. Mm-hmm. They've since had that tree removed and their property's been repaired, but next door to that was a similar tree that causes anxiety and stress, and we have a resident really wanting that tree to be removed. Is this change in this policy, would it allow that to be considered if there was offset planting, for instance, of a more appropriate species in a more appropriate location in the same park, or would it not stretch that far?
Through the Chair, first and foremost, it's an assessment done on the tree and its health and vitality. If there are reasons to believe that there may be risk or elements to do that tree that we perceive as being reasonable to warrant removal, then we will take into account those factors. But first and foremost, the tree, if the tree is healthy and vibrant, it should not be removed on that basis. There would need to be other non-relevant technical factors, because that is an assessment on whether the tree is healthy and vibrant. And at any point in time, an arborist can go and make an assessment, and they can make that determination that it is healthy and vibrant. And that should be the most important factor with respect to maintaining the trees on council-controlled land.
Councillor Gates.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to Ross. When we intend to plant trees on nature strips outside people's homes where they have previously been bare, how do we go about informing the residents, and how are we sure that the message is reaching them? Is there a requirement for feedback? I have a particular situation at the moment, I'll just explain, in a rural residential area which is pretty heavily treed, where we've done a street tree planting. I've had about 6 of the residents tell me they never received any notification and they don't want a tree. And I note in the policy that in regard to removal or tree pruning, private landholder personal preference for no tree is not a reason for removal. So I'm just wondering how we gauge the feedback, or whether there's a database, or whether there's a requirement for people to respond, because it happens quite regularly that people might not want a tree outside their home.
Yeah, through the Chair, when we conduct a tree planting exercise along a street, it is part of the process that every single resident receives notification through their mailbox that we are proposing to plant trees in that street. We wait and we ensure that we get all the feedback that we get from those residents, and often at that point in time, before the trees go in, if a resident objects, we would always not put a tree in front of them. If the resident obviously fails to note the advice that we've given them, or the notice that we've given them, and the tree gets planted and is now a healthy, vibrant tree in front of their property, then the management of trees on council control land policy kicks in as a first point of call.
And how are those letters distributed?
We letterbox drop every street. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. It's just strange. I've never had one where 6 have not received one before.
Yeah, that's if I could get that street on notice, we can look into that for you.
Thank you very much.
That does seem unusual. I had $1 million worth of tree planting in my first 4 years, and the letterbox system worked well, except also for tenanted properties. because the owner of that property doesn't necessarily get that advice. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess through you to the team, just in relation to, off the back of Councillor Gates' comments, just in relation to when that notification goes into a letterbox, if the individuals, say, are overseas or away, they live at the property, the principal place of property, however, they're just not there at the time of that distribution, does this policy give a level of flexibility for those considerations whereby they may not have had the actual opportunity because they weren't present at that particular time to then object to it after the fact if a tree goes in?
Through the chair, it's the same answer. The policy kicks in. Obviously, we've got to ensure that we've spent ratepayer funds to install the tree and maintain the tree. It's been installed. We would look at whether we could deploy our resources back to that particular area and relocate the tree at a reasonable cost. But for all intents and purposes, once a tree goes in, the city would bear additional costs to relocate that tree.
Councillor Doran.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 lines of questioning. It's about the decision review part of the policy. So am I right to assume that you will be the Chief Executive Officer's delegate, Ross?
Through the chair, for trees in the urban estate, correct. There is also trees in natural areas where there's another manager that manages all those trees.
I'm curious as to how many of these appeals or decision reviews you're anticipating given your current workload.
So through the chair, given that for all intents and purposes there's minimal change to the actual decision review process, albeit it's a lot more clearer in the current policy, I receive on average probably 1 or 2 of these a month, and I don't anticipate that to increase.
You don't anticipate that to increase?
Sounds like Councillor Doran's got a few for you.
I guess the question is, I raised this during my briefing in the policy discussion, in that we are now providing a pathway for a review, a formal pathway for review, which I think is good, Chair. But I think it's going to be used quite significantly. Now, I can understand, I do have a question that says here that disagreement with the arborist assessment is not a sufficient reason, but you won't really know the appeal until they submit the information to you. And I'm concerned that this is going to create quite a number of appeals, because councillors on the front lines experience arborists' feedback to customers a lot that I disagree with. So I am surprised that you're not expecting this to be utilised much, especially for non-technical related matters, which are subjective.
Through the chair, we have considered that. Often when we ask the resident to provide any additional information that's non-technical in nature, we fail to receive it.
Chair, just on that, so to unpack that a little bit, non-technical in nature from a non-arborist is going to be what they believe to be relevant information. Is that not right?
Through the chair, the purpose of the non-technical information, or the non-technical matters per se, is for them to provide evidence that is not related to the tree that may help us inform the decision on the tree. So they need to provide other evidence to suggest that could help us make a decision on the matter.
So one final question on this line, though. In that instance, unpacking the example, is an arborist assesses it, says it's not, nothing needs to be done. Customer contacts the councillor office, and for a variety of reasons since Tropical Cyclone Alfred, says that for these reasons they still remain extremely anxious about this big tree coming into the house. And one, I use Councillor Fowler's example, one came down not too long ago that looked exactly the same. I guess that will end up being reviewed anyway before you decide whether or not it's a relevant review, because you do have to assess their case for the review, but whilst reviewing it.
Through the chair, that is correct. Yes.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm supportive of this, but I stepped through this in the discussion. I think this is going to lead to, because we know on the front lines the anxiety around these matters, this is going to lead to quite a significant increase in requests for review, and I just hope that the officers are ready for that and from a resourcing perspective.
Through the chair, we'll be the first to advise you if it requires an increase in resources to meet the demand as a result of the change of this policy.
Chair, there's just one other query in relation to the policy that I was hoping to get some clarity on, and whether or not there's a change, because it was brought up in my briefing. One of the real problems I see in the reporting of the initial response is it tends to be a Latin word for the tree, maybe it's a Xanadu, a Latin word for the tree, and then says no pruning or no action is required, and a date it was done, right? We don't tend to get any more information than that, because the workload is obviously quite high and they're out and doing a lot. But that's sort of an insufficient answer for the customer, which then leads to what I was indicating before about a request for a review. It was shown to me that there was a document being worked on that would provide more information around the types of trees and why they're okay where they are, and some more information about generally about what sort of trees are there. But also, I feel like the first response needs to provide more clarity as to the reason and more information, because that could prevent what I was trying to articulate earlier, which will be an influx in reviews if you provide more information at the first point. And that was something that I was briefly shown, but is that something that you've got to the point where it's ready to be distributed, and any change in the response nature?
So through the chair, there's two parts to my answer on that. First is we are preparing collateral and material to provide residents, to get them to understand the values, the benefits of the trees, and then the risk-based approach in which we take. But I would also offer to council that ever since the two serious weather events that we have, we are spending a significantly more amount of time with our customers to get them over the line, or get them to at least understand how we assess the trees. We have noticed a considerable uplift in that level of anxiety in the community, and we have done a high level of proactive work in that space, recognising that level of anxiety in the community, and it has come at a cost. We are, our budgets are struggling in our tree management at the moment because of all of that additional work, and that is a proportionate and appropriate, considering how much our tree estate was affected over the last couple of years.
Can I ask you a question on that? So what does that look like? If you give me an example, when you say greater resourcing's going in at that, what's that look like? Is that a call to meet with a resident and chat with them about the tree? What's it look?
So through the chair, it's exactly that. It's once upon a time we'd meet a resident on site, or all our teams would meet a resident on site. It would take 5 minutes. It's now taking half an hour or an hour to talk them through the changes. So it's that stuff. It's just time with the resident, talking them through it. We have noticed there's been a considerable uplift just simply in that liaison with residents, and 9 times out of 10 we are successful in that engagement with them on explaining the benefits of the tree, but it is taking longer.
That becomes a very expensive tree. Just on that matter again, before I go back to Councillor Doran, I'm wondering if we could I'm just thinking about the cost of doing that. If we could do video clips. Someone goes out to a tree. Hi, I'm looking at this tree. See that, this is what makes it good. Just as an initial summary that might be able to stop the 1 hour conversations. I don't know. I mean, if you're assessing it anyway, a little video clip added to the file, I would think could be helpful. Could be helpful councillors.
Yep.
And I don't think that takes any more work. They're just recording what they're actually doing in real time.
So through the chair, council will know that we are currently in the process of developing an urban forest strategy. Part of the outcomes of that strategy will be a targeted or specific education campaign where not only are we talking through the benefits, but we'll talk through, what arborists assessing, exactly what you've just asked for, how we go about our planting and species palette, what are the effects that long-term growth in the canopy will provide a relative community. All of this is being prepared as part of the urban forest strategy. So all that work's coming. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Doran, did you have another question?
I did. Ross, it's a personal view that more information at the assessment stage is helpful for anxiety, but also for them to clearly understand what to look for if something changes in the health of the tree. There is a document that I was briefly shown that the tree team has been working on. I guess my question to you is, have you sought assistance from the city marketing team around that? Thank you, the head nods. And will that be part of the package that goes in the response? I think that more information is good to allay concerns, but also to prevent 100 a week instead of 2 a month in the decision review process.
So through the chair, that work is almost complete and will be going out shortly. Yep.
And will we get a look at that at some point?
Through the chair, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? No. Do you wish to continue?
Thank you, Chair. The next policy that is presented for your consideration today, thank you, Ross, is the infrastructure charge identification, monitoring and collection policy. I do have an SME here in relation to this one as well. I have our General Manager of City Development, Mick Moran, on hand if we've got any technical questions. Just to go through this one, it was originally presented in our February report to GAF and it was deferred purely from a workload and timeliness perspective, and we're therefore now bringing that back to you at this meeting. This policy was originally adopted in 2022 in response to QAO recommendations and an audit that they had undertaken in relation to some outstanding and the time frames around assessing active infrastructure charges in the organisation. Part of the recommendation from the QAO in relation to this policy that was the city put in place procedures and processes to actually address this. And our response at that point in time, which is consistent with a lot of the policy framework and the policies that you've considered over the last 18 months, was to put a policy in place for really what is an operational process matter within the city. So we obviously, in accordance with our practices, undertook a review of this. We had a look at the Planning Act, which really outlines the legislative framework for infrastructure charges, and it's quite a stringent legislative framework that's outlined in the Planning Act. Given the nature of this particular policy and the procedural content that it includes, we are recommending that this policy be retired. I would like to point out that there was a third part to the recommendation that's before you in the report today that we actually would like to council consider not adopting today, and I'll just go through the reasons for that. So since we put this report together, we've had a number of questions come through from councillors, and particularly on the back of our GAF pre-briefing last week in relation to what was the table in the current policy that's been basically replicated in the recommendation number 3 before you today. There's a couple of issues with that recommendation. One is it's actually not factually correct in the way that it's worded. We would need to either adapt the words or not consider that as a recommendation. And based on the fact that it really is operational, we're recommending that that doesn't need to be cemented in a council resolution today. What happened on the back of the QAO audit and the subsequent new processes that have been put in place across the city is our planning department developed or established a a dedicated team to monitor these processes within the city. It's monitored, it's regularly reported. Infrastructure charges or what are active infrastructure charges is regularly followed up in accordance with those periods, and that is happening on an ongoing basis. And I do understand it's also something that the QAO regularly touch on with the city when they do their audits with us on an annual basis as well. Happy to take any questions.
No questions? Councillor Curtis.
Oh, it's not a question, but I'm happy to move a change recommendation to remove item 3 from the officer's recommendation. Is that how you want it done?
Correct. Thank you.
Right.
Through the chair.
Okay, we've got a seconder for that. Councillor Martin. So we've got recommendation in front of us. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Curtis?
No. Oh, sorry. Vanessa Green just explained the reasoning behind removing item 3 because there's some errors and non-factual elements to that, and it's also not required.
Councillor Martin.
If I could just add, Chair, because Vanessa and I had spoken quite a bit about this, because obviously the overall QAO recommendation was not to replicate the Act, and the Act says when levied charges become payable, it's really prescribed, before you get your certificate of occupancy and certain elements there, whether it's different, material changes of use or reconfiguration of lot, whereas the policy kind of talked about, it feels like it was more of an operational guide, that if someone got a DA, didn't build, there were some timeframes that were for reviewing active infrastructure charges, so almost like an enshrined kind of clock to go back and check. So that will still happen with officers, but the Act, I think it muddies the water to say, have a policy that says, okay, if the infrastructure charges are hypothetically over $1 million, they have 4 years to pay it, when the Act says they'll pay it before they get their occupancy or when they build. So I think it's clearer.
Okay. So we have the mover and seconder. Do you have any further questions about that, Councillor Gates? No, you're okay. That's okay. Anyone else? Anyone wish to speak against? Okay, close, Councillor Curtis.
I'll just comment. Both of the policies that we've reviewed in today's SCAF meeting, the first one being the tree management policy, officers have been really proactive in meeting individually with councillors. This is one that, depending on the location of your division, may be used a lot or a little, but one that's certainly forward-facing and one that we use to communicate to our residents with. So it's been wonderful to have such an ongoing engagement in the process of that review. So well done. And infrastructure charges, one that we've just amended today through a change recommendation, just reflects the fact that it's more of a process rather than a policy, and reflects all of the hard work the officers and councillors have done in making sure that the remaining policies are fit for purpose. And that's my close.
That is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we move on to 7.1, which is a closed report item, but I just wonder if people are seeking a presentation or they have any questions which can be asked in open, or whether we need to move into closed.
Chair, I would like the presentation.
Okay, great. So we'll move into closed. Basis for confidentiality is that it's relating to the local government budget. So I'll move that. Councillor Taylor second. All in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much for that. So we have the committee recommendation on the screen. Do I have a mover for that item? Councillor Martin, seconded Councillor Fowler. Councillor Martin, do you wish to speak to it?
No, I think that's self-explanatory. Thank you, Chair.
Very good. Anyone else wish to speak for or against? All in favour? Great. Thank you. I'm not aware of any general business items. I call the meeting closed at 3:30. Thank you.